All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome everyone to our event called The Issues of Enlargement Policy. My name is Közszolgálati. I'm the secretary of Zoltán Magyari Student College for Advanced Studies. To my left is Áron James Miszlivetz, who's a researcher of the European Strategy Research Center. And to my right is Aleksander Arabadźić, the CEO of the Academy of Polish Careers. To start out with, I'd like to please introduce yourselves and tell us where did you come from and what are your research areas. Thank you.
Hi, hello to everybody. I feel today as being a part of student exam. It's nice to be here in Budapest. As my friend told, I'm Aleksander Arabadźić, CEO of Academy of Polish Careers. Before it was called European Careers. In the beginning, it was a project in Warsaw School of Economics, which was focused on future Pole representatives in European and international agenda to work in the European institution to fight for our Polish rights there. It was first a lecture, some courses, but in one moment we thought that it would be very good to establish a foundation in the Warsaw School of Economics because it was easier to raise some funds. It was easier to make some good cooperation, not only academical cooperation, but also institutional. And it's, as I told, it's very important for us to do everything in this motto, which was once upon a time motto of Polish Foreign Ministry, to Poland to serve, Europe to shape, and world to understand. And this is also the motto of our foundation. And there was also a question about research area. Me as a CEO, but also as a scholar, the main research area are two things. Cooperation between business and science after the EU enlargement and Poland being a part of the European Union, it started to be quite important, but also more open. It's not as it was before. It's now more open for business, but also for some common laws and so on. And other thing is connected with civil influence on security system, the cooperation between the military and government and civil service.
Thank you. I'd like to welcome everybody here today. My name is Áron Miszlivetz. I am a researcher since 2020 at the Europe Strategic Research Institute here at Ludovika University of Public Service. My main research area is the Western Balkans, focusing on enlargement and comparing it and involving on a side European defense and security issues. So I'm trying to bring together the two, EU policy, specific policy area with one of the EU's external actions when we look at the Western Balkans and enlargement. And even though currently I work in multilateral affairs and human rights, for the last 5 years, I've been involved even in practical matters as a public official working in EU affairs and also a long time as a researcher. I think for me, this interest came when I was at university. I finished at the College of Europe in Bruges, and some of you might know that is a school for people who would like to take up European public official posts and work at the EU institutions, and I can recommend all of you to look into it. But my main research topic at the university at the time was focusing on the European neighborhood policy as a more broader context with the Eastern Partnership in Ukraine, where I wrote my thesis actually on the EU's anti-corruption efforts in Ukraine's defense and security sector. I think that cannot even be more relevant as it is today. And even though my focus shifted to the Western Balkans, I'm still trying to look at how the two regions interact, Here I would like to have a little promotion. Just a couple of days ago, our research institute published both in Hungarian and English 2 books with 35 authors on different EU policy issues, where I have written extensively on how the Eastern Partnership and the ongoing conflict there interacts and has an effect on the Western Balkans integration. So in short, I think that would be my research area. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your answers. To give a bit of context to today's event, could you please explain to us briefly what does enlargement policy means?
Question to me now, yes?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Could enlargement policy means? I will try to tell it simply. It's to codify a set of political and economical criteria which are mentioned from 1993 from the Copenhagen criteria. You have to be a part of free market economy. You have to know what is human rights. You have to know what is the rule of law. And truly you have to be a part of the Western world in philosophical, economical, and political view. This is everything. I don't like very long briefs.
Thank you. To go on with, I think we can talk about what are the EU's current growth plans that we currently know about and what the EU is planning.
Thank you. Well, if you look at the EU's current growth plans, we can see it not only involves the neighborhood countries, neighboring countries. It does have over 80 trade agreements around the world with third countries, and it will at least have 100 in the near future. Just this month, it finalized an agreement with New Zealand. So you can see that it's trying to be very active in areas where other countries such as China or America have already been involved, and trying to strengthen its global actor and stance in the world economically when it comes to investments. However, I think there's a strong focus now with the ongoing conflicts in the neighborhood and looking at the challenges these facing with migration, with the new technological transitions, with the climate change. How important is to focus on the Western Balkans, and there's been a lot of progress going on, especially if we look at North Macedonia with the Prespa agreement, if we look at the current enlargement packages with the recommendations that now all countries, all 6 Western Balkan countries can go on board and start accession negotiations with the endorsement of the European Council, which gives this highest political endorsement regarding the issue. But next to this, looking at the external dimension of enlarging the EU, it also has to go pair in parallel with an internal systemic change, because an EU currently with 27 member states is a very different EU than what we'll have with 30 plus members, with varying forms of integration, different areas where they're developing, and the whole institutional setup of the EU will need to be rethought, and the decision-making processes if we want to have an efficient but also working community together.
No.
Okay, now that we've gone over the EU's current growth plans, I'd like to ask both of you, what are the chances of the current candidate countries, and which countries are these, to clarify it firstly?
Okay, I think probably we'll have the same stance. I think the countries which have the biggest possibility to become the member of the European Union at the moment is North Macedonia and Montenegro, because of the being part of the Western Balkans. There are countries which are Slovenia and Croatia, which are in the European Union. Also, it's quite important that Western Balkans, for the economical but also security system in Europe, are Achilles heel. It's quite dangerous to have countries in the southern part of Europe which are not part of the European family. But it's the easiest way to give this smaller countries the first step. After this, maybe Serbia, and I don't know, I think probably maybe it's some political fiction. I think that the United Kingdom will come back to the European Union in the future. After the change of government next year, after the elections, they will start some discussion in the European Union, in their House of Commons, and about rejoining European Union. That's my stance. There are also Turkey, I think it's all the time only on the paper, because this is all the time also another cultural world, other political culture, and it will be quite hard to fullify criteria, political, mainly political criteria. It's also, I'm from Poland. We also want Ukraine to join the European Union, but we have to remember that Ukraine is all the time on a struggle, on war, and even after the war, there will be a long way to change their system, to rebuild the economy, and it's not so easy to achieve all criteria so fast. We know also the problems with, for example, with agriculture. We have protests all the time in Poland and also in Romania, because there's quite big problems with the agriculture market because of flowing of a lot of goods, agriculture goods from Ukraine, which it's quite important to say, they are not so big quality as our European very high level qualified goods. And for example, Poland and Hungary, Romania. Poland is, most of you know, quite a big ally of Ukraine. It's also advocate for the NATO. It's helping from the beginning of the war. And for me, the beginning of the war in Ukraine is not 2022, but 2014, when they started the struggle for the democracy. But I don't believe that Ukraine will join the European Union family in about 10 years. Montenegro, North Macedonia, and United Kingdom reintegrating to the European Union family.
Thank you. I think I would follow up on this. I do agree that I think North Macedonia has gone the furthest in integration, and also Montenegro. I do see them as in the near future. I wouldn't dare to say a date. They always say 2030, but I think there's a big chance that they will join. However, I think what is the biggest problem to resolve is always the Belgrade-Pristina dialogue, and I think we need to put in more effort to start dialogue. And here is we come back to the issue which is often overlooked, and not only, as you said, Aleksander, to fulfill the technical criteria, institutional reform, democracy, rule of law, judiciary, but also for the Western Balkans, I think is the most important, resolve the social trauma, the historical reconciliation, to have cultural dialogue, interreligious dialogue, because I think without resolving that, you can have all kinds of reforms, but people will need to learn how to work together, how to live together, and I think that's the underlying question: how the 6 countries, very multi-ethnic, very diverse in history and culture, and how they can resolve and how they can work together with such a past. And they have to kind of realize that they're all in the same boat together, especially if they want to join the EU, because they will be part of a club which has certain rules, has certain decision-making processes together, and this will need to push them forward to go in as a community. And I think once we have 1 or 2 countries from the region joining, it'll be much easier for others to see that there's positive process and motivation that they can use to commit to those reforms. So I think that's one of the issues. On Turkey, we always talk about Turkey as being for 3, 4, 5 decades in the waiting line for membership. But Turkey as a NATO member, it doesn't really need to explain itself to become an EU member. It's there. It's big. It's one of the biggest, if you say, European members in the neighborhood. It has a very strong army and defense capabilities. It's a NATO member, and if it's an EU member or not, we are all reliant on each other. Like Turkey is, Turkey's economy on us when they come to work to either EU or Europe, and also for EU regarding migration and security issues. So I think there's a very strong interrelation between the EU and Turkey in that sense. So whether it's a member or not, that is a fact. And of course, everybody says that it should join and so forth. But I think this reliance is undeniable. So we have to work together anyway. And that's, I think, very important to look for the future.
Thank you. Very interesting points that you just now mentioned. Next point is what is the European Council's role in this case?
Well, thank you. The role of the European Council, of course, formalizes the decision that they make a unanimous decision when a member state wants to join a member candidate country who wants to join the EU. Of course, they have to submit the application, and the Commission has to review it and look at all the criteria, all the specific technical details. They might have some working groups, some country visits and reports ongoing. They'll have to check also the enlargement countries, the enlargement reports, individual country reports, and make an overall assessment. And then once they presented this to the Council, and the Council formalizes this decision unanimously. And with that, then they can also start first the accession negotiations and then also formally become a member. Of course, it's a long process. And a lot of people say that, if we look at the Maastricht criteria, it's outdated. And if we look at the past 20, 30 years, the world has changed so fast that the accession criteria, I think, will need to be reconsidered to be fit for the new age in the new world. If you look at the digital green transitions, if you look at AI, technology, I think we really have to reconsider and rethink our priorities and how we want member states to join and what priorities we think are important, because maybe the ones we have now are mostly need to be rethought and updated.
Okay, I think that was. I would add only that all the time we have to remember that European Union is also a political family, and it's also quite important that if it's not maybe how does the role of European Council, but it's more philosophical speech. It will be European Union is a political family. We have to remember, and of course, the European Council is representing the European Union. Is making it's doing the enlargement policy, but at the end of the day, it's the most important thing that the member countries will agree that another country can be part. It can even not only be part, but even can start the accession. And all the time, the European Union is a family of independent countries, and every country has to see a political achievement, a political thing that will give them some points in the future that another country will become another member all the time. We will see how will be the shape of the future European Union. There is quite big, also sometimes a little bit angry discussion between the countries, between the European groups. We'll see what will be the shape of the European Union in the future, but at the moment, and even when the European Union will give more power to the Commission, all the time the last word will be the word of the governments of the countries. I don't know what will be the shape of the European Union in 30 or 50 years, but I think 10, 15 years, all the time, the most important will be the countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. To go a little back in our history of Europe, I'd like to ask, can we go over how did Hungary and Poland join the European Union, starting with Poland?
Okay. Okay, I remember we have even a small discussion in the emails. It's quite important to say that Poland and Hungary had quite similar way to joining the European Union after the collapse of the communism, after coming back to the Western world in political way, of course, because in cultural and historical way, we have to remember that Poland and Hungary was all the time part of Europe. But once more, in the 90s, when we started the official way we started the, wait a moment, we started to prepare our countries to join the European Union. We started officiate the procedure to becoming a member state. We were prepared for this, but mainly also, I started it before, because of the will of the citizens, but also bipartisan agreement between the political powers in Hungary and Poland. It was the rat de tête of Polish parties, of Polish governments, from the left side, from the right side, from the center, that Polish joining the European Union and the North Atlantic Treaty Organization was the Polish rat de tête, and as far as I remember from history, it was also the same in Hungary. And as far as I remember, your now governing Prime Minister Viktor Orban was the Prime Minister who was the Prime Minister in the moment when the Hungary started to become member of North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and it was the first step to become formally a member of the Western world, of the Western security system. After the Western security system, we started another step. It was joining the political, economical family, the European Union, in 2004, and probably also I'm here, for example, on this very nice festival because of the anniversary of 20 years being part of the European Union, both Hungary and Poland.
Thank you. Maybe most of you don't remember when we joined the EU. I was 13 years old. I remember I was in Western Hungary, in Szombathely, in one of the towns, and it was a big celebration, and I think there was this really real feel of euphoria that we were always part of Europe, but we also came back to Europe. And I think it was a really important moment, not only for Hungary, but also the other 9 countries who joined back then in 2004. And I think ever since, we can say that 20 years is a long time. And I think that the old member states cannot call us anymore the new guys in the club, the new members, because 20 years is a long time. And I think we developed quite a lot. If we look infrastructurally, if we look at building partnerships, communities, you have Erasmus program, you can travel, you can live, work in Europe all around. And I think that's one of the greatest achievement, the tangible achievement for people to bring people together, to bring cultures together, to learn languages, to have this feeling that you are really part of a community. And in a couple of hours, you can just drive and be in another country, but you're still part of one family in Europe. And I think that our countries spent too much time, and it was very traumatic behind the Iron Curtain, even though they called Hungary the happiest barrack in and around. And I think all of us had this aspiration for freedom. If we look even back in history, King Stephen I, one of the first kings of Hungary, declared that we would be part of the Christian world in Europe. And I think that's one of the guiding lights of Hungary and also the region, that that we are part of this cultural, religious society and world that we live in, and we call Europe ourselves. And you can always have this debate: what is Europe? I know that in 1987, Morocco wanted to join the EU, but they said no, because it's not a European country. But I think it's still on the other side of the Mediterranean, and I think we'd look at a very different Europe now if they would be a member, especially if we look at the issue on migration or not. So, we're trying to build partnership with these North African countries. So, it's always an ongoing and interesting debate. What is Europe, and where it ends? I think it really ends where people feel that they're European and that they have this sense of commonality and this joint feeling of becoming members in a club. And I think that we have gone a long way, and even though we might not have thought that the Europe we are facing now would be the Europe that we are facing now, 20 years ago, we were facing many challenges. We have a war in the East, we have climate change, we have the technological revolution, artificial intelligence, we have economic hardships, we are just coming out of a pandemic, and we don't know what will come in the future, and it's becoming more and more uncertain. But I think the certainty is that we can only do it if we work together. We can only solve the problems together, and we'll have to find a common voice.
Getting back to a previous thought, Mr. Arabadźić, you mentioned that Britain is likely to come back or apply to join the EU again. Can you please go into this in more detail? What are the reasons? What are the reasons that you see that this is likely to happen in the future, and maybe when?
Yes, of course. Thank you for the question. I will only make some small, because I made a small mistake in my last statement. Of course, Hungary and Poland joined the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, not in 1997, but in 1999. It was a small mistake, but I was thinking about very good weather. Why do I think that Great Britain will come back to the European Union? Because Brexit, I was quite long also in Polish politics. I think that Brexit could be a disaster, could be some neutral way for Great Britain, or also I think it could be also a success for the country. But at the moment, we see in social and economical ways which are struggling Great Britain, the United Kingdom. They have problems with economy, with society. They were sure that Brexit will give them that they will be a free country, that they will be, as far as I remember, former Prime Minister Boris Johnson said that after Brexit, Great Britain will be a luxury boat, a yacht, which will be flowing on the economical oceans of the world. And it's, excuse me for bad word, but it started to be bullshit. They have very big problems. And we see also on the political environment in the United Kingdom that the Conservatives, which are in some way, of course, David Cameron was against the Brexit, but after the Brexit, the Conservative Party was in charge, and the political failure of Brexit is their failure, and that's why the Labour Party will come back to the power. I'm not quite a big fan of Labour's, because I also have more conservative agenda in my life and in my career, but I think that they will start a big discussion. What was the biggest mistake of Great Britain in last decade? And they will start to say it's Brexit. Not because of Brexit as an idea, but because of not preparing the Brexit as a British success. In economical and social ways. One of the reasons of Brexit was, of course, that they will get back the control of the borders, that they will not have the immigrants. Remind me from the Europe, mainly from the Central and Eastern Europe. There are a lot of Poles and Hungarians there. They were working there. Of course, back in control, but all the time they need cheap working class. This working class comes from other countries like Bangladesh, like all British colonies, and we have to truly say that they are not the same European culture, which all the time Great Britain, even as a British Empire, the British Empire where the sun was not rising down, all the time they are part of the European cultural and economical heritage.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up a bit on that. Yes, if we look at Great Britain, I mean, once they try to, they don't really know what they want. I mean, I just know that they just try to conclude and successfully rejoined Horizon Europe, the EU's 7-year framework program on research and development. But on the other hand, what they said, what Brexit would do, of course, is save the economy, create jobs and growth and economic growth and stop migration. But we see that they're still continuing to have these problems of labor shortage, especially with making it more difficult, not only for British citizens, but European EU citizens to work and be educated in the UK. I have friends who study in the UK and they have to pay immense fees, tuition fees, which they cannot afford. And more people are starting to look towards the EU, Netherlands, Germany, Benelux region, even Hungary too. A lot of international students here, also at Ludovica University. So there's a shift in this, a brain drain. And on the other hand, what they promised that they would stop all these problems, these tendencies, negative tendencies, they simply couldn't. And they're still in the same issue as before Brexit, with only that they're not part of the EU anymore, of this framework. And we always know that the British, always thought differently. There was a third way of thinking, the British way being more sovereign and being more on the equilibrium side of the scale. You always had that balance of power in their decision making. But UK didn't go anywhere. They're still there. They're an island nation, and they're facing a lot of problems. And I think that with a proximity with the EU, there needs to be more cooperation. They need to decide simply in what framework they want to cooperate with. As we've seen with Switzerland too, there hasn't been really much of an advancement on concluding the Swiss-EU agreement, because Switzerland is more of a protectionist state. But of course, you have to look at certain problems the country's facing, and you had a lot of since the 2004 enlargement, a lot of people from Central Eastern Europe working in the UK, taking up jobs the British wouldn't, and now simply it's making more difficult them to work there in the nursing sector, in hospitals and healthcare, in maybe lower paying jobs which the British wouldn't necessarily go into, service sector, etc. And facing a labor shortage there, that's not really sustainable, I think, for the future. So they really need to rethink what they want to do, and that's only up to them.
Thank you very much for your answers. The last question of this panel will be addressed now shortly, and after that we will open up to the audience, and we will be answering the questions that you might have about this topic. So for the finishing part, I'd like to ask, how can Hungary help the enlargement process, especially considering the West Balkans?
Thank you. Very interesting and important question. Some of you might not know, but Hungary is one of the countries, I think the only countries in the EU, which has EU experts, integration experts in all of the Western Balkans countries in the ministries. And I think for the several years and decades now, and I think to share that experience real time and first-hand experience with 20 years of membership, and I think working together with Central Eastern European countries, that the Central Eastern Europe and Western Balkans can become a super region in that sense, that we do share certain type of common culture, history, cultural proximity, geographical proximity, similar problems, energy dependence, competitiveness, the size of our countries, state of our economies, or the structure of our economies. It's more or less similar to varying degrees, I think when we look at the upcoming Hungarian presidency, we'll see more and more, as in 2011, it was one of the priorities, and one of the mottos back then was a stronger Europe. And I think it's fair to say that we can revisit that motto again, because we do need a stronger Europe, and we cannot have a stronger Europe without the Western Balkans.
Okay. I'm not representative of Hungary, but as a scholar, I can only add that it's true that the role of Hungary is the most important, mainly for the Western Balkans, and they're doing quite good jobs. On the other hand, I will maybe change a little bit the question, but exactly the same thing is doing Poland for Moldova and for Ukraine. Without the political support and economical support of Poland, there would be no free Ukraine. The Moldova also would be having problems in economical and political way, and there is also all the time the discussion that Hungary is neutral in the struggle in the eastern part of Europe, but on the other hand, for Hungarian policy, for Hungarian sovereignty, and for influence in the European Union, it's the most important part to have peace here in the, as I called it before, in the Achilles heel of political and security system of Europe. And we're doing good job, Hungary. Thank you.
All right, I'd now like to ask the audience if they have any questions about the topic. Please state them now. The gentleman on the white shirt there.
Maybe I will start, but I have the microphone. We haven't mentioned, probably because I don't want to make a mistake. Also, Albania and Bosnia and Herzegovina, they are officially candidating countries. Yes. Of course, they are officially candidating countries, but at the moment, we hope that in the future they will become a member of the European family. But nowadays, they have two big problems: economical and also cultural problems and political problems, to become member of the European Union. In, I don't know, 10 years, maybe in 20 or 30 years, there is a possibility after Montenegro and North Macedonia will become member countries of the European Union, because they will be showing the way. Albania have problems with Kosovo and with crimes and so on. Bosnia and Herzegovina is the same problem as Ukraine politically. There is all the time problems tensions between the Serbian citizens and Croatians, and of course we have to remember in the 90s there was a quite big war in the region, and it was mainly because of Bosnia and Herzegovina. If it would be the problem between Croatia and Serbia, probably there would be no war between those two countries. And so 20, 30 years, we'll see what will be going there. But it's quite important, and it's also a role of Hungary that there would be peace there, because there are also, I'm reading some informations that in Bosnia and Herzegovina there are starting to be quite big, once more, ethnical tension between the countries, between the federation.
Thank you. Yes, I can only reiterate what has been said here before, but also I think I can advise everyone to look at the enlargement package of 2023, where actually all countries could make advancements in certain reforms in areas. But when we look at Bosnia and Herzegovina and Albania, we also need to look at that fighting organized crime is still an issue. Anti-corruption efforts still need to be stepped up. Also, as has been said before, the minority issue is always a sensitive question. And I think keeping the peace currently, I think that stability, political stability, that's the most important there. And it's a delicate issue, just as the Belgrade-Pristina dialogue. And that's why we're talking more and more about North Macedonia, too, as a more advanced on the path. But I think once a country joins the EU from that region, it can be a motivating effect, which can help the other countries too to actually see that, look, there's this country who joined, it's really positive and they're really developing, and we want to be part of this too.
Thank you for your answers. More questions? Yeah.
Hello, my name is Raul Rios. There's an expression in English that if you have a hammer, every problem seems like a nail. So it feels a little bit like this in terms of this enlargement talk. So my question is, should the EU even seek enlargement? I ask because, as has been hinted by the panel, even by both of you, there's a lot of issues in terms of harmonization of both political and maybe even cultural aspects within the EU, coupled with the fact that one country can determine whether or not, that member state decides to join or future member state decides to join. Thank you.
Thank you. So your question, to reiterate, is should the EU seek to enlarge? Well, I think the EU is an ongoing process and project which, brings itself to enlargement at a greater extent, and it always tried to enlarge itself. You also need to think about, deepening and how the two correlate and how they interplay. But I think if we look at, Brexit too, it's not evident that the EU it's like Fukuyama and the end of history. History never really ends. It either repeats itself or it develops further into other areas and times. But with the EU too, it's a reverse. It can be a reverse effect too. So it's kind of, maybe if we look at enlargement, to keep what we have currently while trying to make it beneficial to the most people who are also not members. And I think that's a difficult question. How to keep those acquis, how to keep those gains, those positive developments, peace, economic development, security we have today and we can enjoy today, while allowing more and more members in with diverse interests and issues. And I think that'll be the most difficult question in this case to solve.
What can I add? It was good, but it could be an issue for another panel. It's also very philosophical. Should the EU enlarge? Of course. How should it enlarge? It's a big open question. At the moment, when I was answering other questions, I mentioned that the Western Balkans are the Achilles heel of European security and economical system. That's why they should be the part of the European Union family, and they are geographically and historically part of Europe. Also, the will of the nation in Ukraine, the struggle for liberty, shows that they want to be the part of the European Union, European family. Moldova historically also is the part of Europe. Open question about the Caucasus. We will see what will be the way the citizens, the political class will choose. Maybe they will in the future, at the end of the century, maybe they will be parts of European family. As I mentioned before, United Kingdom reintegration. Turkey, I'm not sure. I think that Turkey will be all the time the bridge between the West and the East, because they are too small, too big to be a member state of the European Union. They are a different country, but on the other hand, they are in some kind of part of they are a bridge between Europe and Asia, and they will be all the time in some way not a part of the European family, but some kind of European relative, some cuisine of Europe. Well, I like very much also the Turkish cuisine. I like very much kebab, and it's also the Turkish gastronomy change for good European kitchen.
Thank you for answering these questions. I think we've just neared the end of our panel, so I'd like to thank all to our dear guest speakers that they attended and had a really interesting discussions. I think we touched on some really actual and interesting topics. I'd like to also thank the audience for attending and listening to this panel. And that would be all. Thank you for your attention and have a good day.